Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Scott Fischer here with you, and you are listening to Don't Let Haboob Hit You in the Face. This is my metaphor on life that I have for over 2 decades worked with families who are loving someone who is having challenges in the aging experience. And too often families find themselves buried under just a avalanche of issues and problems. And when they look back, they often see that there were signs or there were things going on in life that they might have been smart to pay attention to, or maybe they have ignored. And had they not ignored those things, and maybe we could have prevented a crisis. And therefore Haboob comes in and becomes a partner in their life for a season. And so while I help families excavate from the avalanche, my businesses for 2 decades have helped families also avoid. And that's what the point of the podcast here is to help avoid crisis. I always say, call me before the crisis, avoid having Haboob hit you in the face. And today my guest is Danny Gutknecht. Danny's the CEO for a company called Insperity here in the greater Phoenix area. Hey, Danny, good to have you with me today. Hello.
Hello, how are you doing, Scott? I'm actually the CEO of Pathways.
What did I say?
Insperity.
Did I say Insperity? That's my payroll company. Well, holy smoke. Well, there you go. Botch number one.
Awesome.
Sorry about that. Thank you for
No
correcting
worries.
me. There's a letter on my desk from my payroll company, Insperity.
Yeah.
So shout out to those guys. So, hey, Danny, thanks.
I was like, I've heard of them before.
This is real. Y'all, this is real. We're just regular people trying to bring people the good news. Danny, tell me about your work and why are we talking to each other? This is good stuff.
Oh my goodness. My work really has to do with helping human beings be better human beings. And it really starts at work. And the reason that I kind of focus in the work instead of, say, the consumer market is work seems to be a place today that we spend 57% of our adult life, and it's where we're most accountable for our actions and our relationships and things like that. We can get a little bit let our guard down a little bit at home, not that we don't work through those relationships too. But, work also is a place where we kind of think about getting better and maybe do something about it, because the work environment's changing all the time. Things are evolving fast. Everybody, of course, knows that really well nowadays. You essentially have to change a lot of work. You have to reinvent yourself, and change is not something that we are aware of. So My work goes deep into how we actually, say, control that change, or you don't control it as much as you work with it, and how to understand yourself better. And so I've taken a long journey to get there.
It starts inside then. It starts with us as individuals, not my boss. It needs to be better, not my work. You're talking to me or us. That person. Yeah. Wow. I've been out on my own, business owner now 23 years. I think of the years prior to that, about what you just said, is that I felt like my job in those years when I was running psychiatric hospitals and psychiatric facilities, that's what I did. I have a nursing degree from ASU. I felt like, unfortunately, work got my best, and I had so little to give at home, or I was running on empty by the time I got home. Is that other people's experience too?
It's a lot of people's experience. I mean, I work with executives in all sorts of companies. So, for example, maybe the largest computer company in the world, they're named after a fruit. There are folks that go home in the evening and, have dinner with their family and literally conk out because they gave so much to the work environment. And what's interesting, the part really help people dig into, is it doesn't actually have to be that way. One of the things that we are all swimming in, we're all fish swimming in this, sort of social and economic atmosphere, is that we are in a deluge of information. I mean, Scott, you can probably remember, when we were growing up, the phone was attached to the wall.
Right.
You actually, when you were calling for a date, you actually phone and it was busy half the time, and then you had to wait, and then you actually picked it up again and this guy got on the phone and you'd be like, is
Yeah.
Sally there? And
Yeah.
you'd be like, no, what do I say?
I really have
Right?
to. Yeah. I do remember that it was that way.
There was nowhere to go. How do I ask for a date other than maybe your parents or maybe your friends? But you couldn't go online and get all this information. And so we're in this information deluge. And there's a good book by a guy named Zygmunt, I think, and it's called the Liquid Modernity. And he basically talks about how in the past we had these structures that basically told us go climb the ladder. There's security at the end of the journey for you. This is who and how to be. This is the American dream. All that is over. It's liquid. There's all sorts of people telling us who and how to be. And yet there's this essential configuration to ourselves. Neuroscience studies infant brains, and it's like they're all like a fingerprint. And so the information coming in sort of gets shaped and formed according to our own, say, genetic and psychological footprint. And those sort of things are what help us build models, contextual models in the brain to be able to deal with or recognize circumstances and change. And so there's, and you probably know this, you don't just change by downloading information. You might change a little bit. You don't actually just change by understanding the logic of a scenario. How many of us kind of sit in situations and say, I know I should do this, but it's a very common thing. Or how many, maybe do a little review of ourselves and look back and go, man, I didn't even know I was doing all this stuff, right? So those are the unconscious components, and you've probably seen the unconscious components of the human takeover from working in psychiatric.
Well, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about when you're working with and I'm assuming you do consulting work with organizations and companies to engage better, be better, communicate better, work with the leadership team, work with the folks from all ranks within the organization, so that what's the outcome you're gunning for when you work with a company?
Yeah, let me give you real good ideas, or let me give you a really good example. So I've developed over the years, through a lot of mistakes and toil and reading and trying to, I'll back up a little bit to tell you the story. Actually, let me tell you a story and it'll make a lot more sense in that context.
Okay, yeah.
So when I was young, my grandfather was a builder in Western Nebraska. And he basically, I rode around, like he was sort of my role model. He was a good guy. The town loved him. He got a lot of accolades. And I think it was 8. So I rode around with him for several years in his truck at times. And at about 8 years old, he sits me down and he's like, Danny, don't ever do this work. It is awful. It's hard on you, that sort of thing. And for a kid that's got a role model, that's shocking to me.
Yeah.
And I looked at, from that point forward, I was pretty much really tuned into how adults talked about work, how paradoxical those conversations were at times. They'd show up, oh, I love my job. And then, they'd come home, I hate this stuff and blah. And so I started to really pay attention to that. And it fed into when I was early on in my career, I started to sense how unnatural a lot of our environment was to just the natural human being. How many masks we wore at work and how many facades we put up. And I started to, when I landed in the executive recruitment field, I started to reinvent the way that you interact and understand somebody's journey by taking psychological models and playing with them. And what I learned is that, psychological models that work in science, they kind of know how to explain what something is, but they actually don't have real practical uses in our daily lives. And so what I started to do was started to play with it. And what I didn't know I was doing that over time happened was I sort of this process of how a human being can sit down and examine their own work journey, understand the patterns the unconscious patterns they have in addition to the conscious ones, and work with those, really feel them, and get and so that your cognitive abilities and your feeling along for the ride together, right?
Yeah.
Because if
Yeah.
if you can make these cognitive changes, but when the fit hits the shan, you know, all bets are off, right?
It, it's been my personal experience in my work experience previous that a lot of humans don't make change until they're forced to make change. Either the wife leaves, the husband dies, they lose the job, something catastrophic, the addiction runs their life. You know what I'm saying? I mean, in really drastic situations. And so you're talking about getting ahead of the crisis, which is kind of where I'm going with this conversation too. So do I
Yes.
have, am I on the right track with
Yes.
you?
Oh man. And so what we do, we actually have a work that we can take people through. And it's been orchestrated in a way that they can essentially uncover their own patterns themselves.
Okay.
The key to change, there's a guy that studied how adults actually do change, because it's different than 0 to 25. His name is Jack Meserov, and he said it starts with a disorienting dilemma, which is exactly what you talked about, right? This pain that people experience. Well, that disorienting dilemma doesn't have to be something that happens to us. So just merely by to look at ourselves through the right set of lenses and have
Yeah.
a guide walk you through and work with kind of taking those lenses and having you look at your journey from a lot of different angles, it disrupts what you think is true about yourself and shows you what's really true through another lens. And then you want to solve it, and you're happy to solve it, and you're much more fulfilled solving it that way, right? Because you have some
Oh,
sort of
yeah.
control. You're not in a crisis when you're actually needing to make the adjustments to, you know, all of your internal models.
I have a thesis that I came into this conversation with that I just wanted to just tell you kind of here's the concept of it. Avoiding haboob, my metaphor for, so just so that everybody gets some context, let me just step back half a second. We have 160,000 80-year-olds in Maricopa County. Okay. We have 1 million people already the age of 65. We have thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of families that are entering into what might be the rockiest season of their life, right? We've raised our kids now as adult children. I had my mom recently passed. I have my in-laws that are having their challenges. These are some of the most rocky, rough, emotionally times that families are going to go into. And if they aren't prepared for it, I'm telling you, Haboob is coming. Haboob is coming to my family, and I know what I'm doing for the most part, right? And so, what my mission is to help people avoid this. Is what we're talking about. So, avoiding Haboob can be potentially achieved if we better understand ourselves and learn to interact in our system, family system, potentially more effectively. Am I close?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, and part of understanding yourselves is also understanding, you know, your family's the closest thing to you. And oftentimes we feel stuck in those relationships, and that stuckness in those relationships can generate the right set of emotions within us to investigate parts of ourselves that we didn't know exist.
Well, I'd rather blame my little brothers than look at myself. I mean, just to be
I
honest, I'd rather just blame somebody than go, well, wait a minute here. Let me take a look and see how I function and operate within my system. If you're dealing with people at work, there's a system, there's a culture, right? There's a hierarchy, there's an organization. Well, families have oldest kids, youngest kids, parents, kids that now have to be the parent to the parent, and the parent doesn't want to be parented. You know, there's all kinds of there's roles in all this. And I imagine that your wisdom and insight. I feel like we should do a workshop on this for people.
Happy to
Man.
do a workshop. I think it's more curiosity. Oh, let me give you a great story because
Okay.
it was pre-COVID. I had released a book, Meaning at Work in Its Hidden Language, is my first book. It got to a nurse that was at a nice long-term care facility that had apartments off-site and then had the long-term care, internally up in Scottsdale. Well, Hugh Downs, remember Hugh Downs from 2020?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
He got a hold of the book and asked to meet with me. And so turns out we started to write a book together. I started to interview him. I'd go see him every Saturday. He was over 95 at the time.
Right.
And he was a Renaissance man. I didn't know this. Like he was a NASA to help get John Glenn around the moon. He sailed, halfway around the world in a sailboat with his son.
Really?
He took the gerontology test. This guy never finished college, never went to college, and he took the gerontology test in New York City, and he actually passed it. Great guy. So, and when he took over 2020 was just, they were going to cancel it, and he said, "I'll only go in there if I have complete control." Mm-hmm. So he goes and does it, and for 20 years, it's great. And even when they moved him to the death spot, he ended up doing well. Well, he was older, and his wife was in the long-term care facility. He probably didn't himself need to live there as much, but his wife had fallen, and they were that. And as I began to talk to him, one of the things that the nurses said is like, some days he's like bright and right there, and other days he's a little repetitive. And as I went in every Saturday, I pushed him. Like I didn't let him off the hook. And just because he was Hugh Downs, and I didn't. And the thing that I noticed is I didn't placate to him because he was old. If you notice how people talk to old people a lot of times, they'll, "How are you today?" And, that sort of thing. And I was like, man, if I'm sitting there, I'm going to be like, "What do you mean, how am I today?" And so I pushed him on his thinking a lot, and he started to comment on that. And, I've spent my life interviewing people because I've been using these logical models to kind of understand people. And he's like, "This is the best interview I've ever had," like every week. But the nurses started commenting, "He's more lucid, aware. He's more all week long." Like, when I had to travel and miss a week, they'd be like, he perks up when you get in there and you pay attention.
Really? Wow.
And so part of that was if I missed a couple of times, I had to get in there and work for about 15 to 20 minutes to get him off the old stories and then to get him really into thinking. And I started to realize that a lot of times in our society, we discard, we discount, we think that age is or has to be cognitive decline, or they're not thinking about it anymore. And sometimes it's just like, no, they got a bigger Rolodex. You start to notice that by the time you hit 50, you're like, I'm looking for this, but I got so many words in there, or so many faces, or whatever. It's just a bigger Rolodex you're flipping through to kind of make the connection. And the thing that I realized, because he would take me to dinner with all these people that were over 95. I mean, guys that were still traveling out to Tel Aviv and stuff like that. And the recanting of stories, the retelling of stories is a way of a human being saying, "Hey, wait a minute. My life had meaning and coherence, didn't it?" And it's something that I think is both a message on your journey, wherever you're at on your journey in this arc, to really think about that. And it's a message to say, hey, what's this all about, and what's it for? But it's also a message to listen to people, because by listening to other people's journeys, you get to feel what they went through. You get to kind of, it invokes your imagination in a way that says, gosh, what if I was in those apple fields in a hot air balloon with Hugh and his father over the apple orchards like that, like in Ohio. That would be amazing, right? Like he could paint that picture, and then I could kind of imagine myself there. And
Right.
and so that part is what connects us, Scott. And I
Yeah.
think that our society's got so much information coming that if we don't
Right.
start to remember how to connect, and
Right.
it's a difficult journey.
So here's where the rub comes in inside families, Dan. You have parents, the aging individuals, the folks in their late 70s till their 90s, and life's changing, and they're not getting off this escalator. It is going to where it's going, right? Everybody gets to the end of the line somewhere. And so as the adult kids are watching their parents change, and maybe their care needs are changing, their cognition is changing, conversations have to be had. And to ignore them and to put them off is not loving. It is not respectful. We're writing an article for a journal here in Phoenix coming out in February in the love month. So we're writing it and submitting it now. And the loving thing is to learn how to have these hard conversations amongst our generations, right? Brothers and sisters need to talk, and parents and kids need to talk. And so if I was giving some advice to somebody or talking to families, I tell them stuff like speak often and early, speak in love, reinforce to your parents that you will never want to do anything to them, always with and for them. But I think when you and I were first talking before we did this recording, I was even thinking, man, there's specific things I should have been thinking about, or maybe mom and I should have been talking about before I started, just because I'm even though I'm saying all that stuff in love to her, there's still kind of a forceful part of me that's getting her to do things that she don't want to do. And I'm just wondering if there's some, what your response to that is, and maybe there's a couple of nuggets or something that if you're in you're in the boat, 45 to 65-year-old, and you got parents and you're dreading the conversation, or you're sort of in the middle of it. If you've got anything to insight to what I just said, I sure would love to, some ideas or thoughts.
I think the best insight is curiosity. There's a and really listening, because the thing that I noticed even in talking to, I did over 500 recorded hospice interviews, and the thing that really jumped out to me is that a lot of people are really afraid to die alone, and I think Crossroads Hospice kind of captured that in in the industry, in the communities they serve. But two is that in the face of death, people want to live, right? They want to keep on going on. And if you listen to the being, if you listen to the human being and listen to what they want and what they want resolved, they'll most likely come to terms with the right set of decisions, right? And so we get to, and it may be several conversations, it may be quite a few.
Oh yeah.
But if we try to press our agenda on another living human being too fast, too soon, that actually slows the conversation down. It sort of thwarts the thing that wants to be expressed.
Yeah.
And there's a great, my good collaboration partner, basically, he turned me on to this video about Penn and Teller. Penn and Teller. They did a documentary on Tim's Vermeer. The Vermeer paintings in the 1800s
Yeah.
looked photographic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things that was interesting is it happens that Teller talks. He's only silent for the act.
Yeah.
But one of the things that they were asking him is, they said, you guys show magic trick with these red cups, and then you do it with clear cups, and you tell the audience what's happening. You actually show them the magic trick. And he says, doesn't that take the mystery out of it? And he goes, no. He says, when actually see and witness, they come to the magic trick knowing there's a magic trick. They know that you're going to pull a rabbit out of the hat. The rabbit's going to disappear. But if you show them how you do it, it's actually more mysterious because it takes skill, it takes attention, it takes that. And he goes, when I first met Penn 50 years ago, I chalked him up to, oh, Penn's this and oh, Penn's that. And he goes, but today, like, Penn is more mysterious than he's ever been. And the reality is we're not, there's a whole lot of different facets to a self and us. And if we get curious about who this person is, what wants to be said and expressed, and what do they want to experience, you can kind of take them back and through, and they'll come at a very practical, logical situation. And you might find an answer that's better than the answer, or another answer that's better than either answer that anybody, or either suggestion that anybody has.
I'm thinking about on my own journey with my mom, and I said, we were literally just, mom passed just before Thanksgiving. And as much as Bob and I was our oldest of 4 sons, and as much as we loved and cared for each other, as much work as she helped me with my work at times. She even worked for me. She was like our fill-in receptionist at times. I'm not so sure I ever asked her a question, what she thought about. I asked her stuff like, what do you want to do after you're gone? You want us to cremate you, bury you, have a party? What do you want? But I never really asked her a question that would have been pertinent to the moment. Like, what are you afraid of?
Mm-hmm.
How do you want to live the next 10 years of your life? And I'm just telling you, and I've got more than 2 decades of experience, 40 years professionally. And I'm listening to what you're telling me, and I'm like, wow. And if you're an adult child like me, listening to us, or you stumble across this recording, that be curious, ask. It reflects your interest in the other person. It reflects your willingness to hear them, and we all want to be heard.
The gift you can give to somebody is for them to be heard and seen.
That's gold, Danny. That's gold, man. So much of communication and what functions, like primarily work with folks at work and in their work environments. I knew there would be gold in what you were doing and what you've experienced, and we can glean from your work and your experience, so that we can give people tools to get through this and hopefully avoid. And you made a joke. You're like, oh, I've done a lot of mess ups, and I've bashed my forehead 1,000 times to get where. Sure wish there was somebody coaching me along the way that you would have learned maybe a little more efficiently. But I guess, maybe before we get out of here, I just want to ask you if there is maybe one more element to this that I just kind of want to drill towards, and that is, if there's resistance. Some parents don't want to be talked to. Like, they don't talk to me about that, and they just want to put their heads in the sand. Like you're not getting older, or dad isn't having dementia. We shouldn't be talking about this, because there's some families that are just like really, really private. They are the generation that survived World War II and the end of the Depression. So that's a hardy, private, proud, convicted group. Anything practical that you might say that where there's real resistance or there's real pushback, how you can still speak in love and concern, be curious, and maybe eventually pierce some of that resistance?
Every case is probably going to be challenging, and it's going to be challenging because there's a lot of patterns that are common in families, patterns that are common with other people. I think in some cases you might want to bring somebody as the third voice into the conversation sometimes that can listen for a while. I'd say if I was in that situation, I felt that situation before. I felt frustrated and going, is there any way I can get through? And what the interesting thing that I've learned is the little voice inside just says, stop, be present, get out of your own agenda, and try to learn about the other person's agenda, even if they need to talk about a lot of other things before they get there. They know it, they sense it, they feel it. That's the resistance, right? You can't, it's interesting, right? Because we all have these models that create the patterns in our lives. And the issue is that when you try to address something that's embedded directly, it has novel ways of figuring out ways around that, right? Like it's I think psychology calls them complexes, right? But they have novel ways of showing up in places you didn't know they were going to show up, and fighting it off, or giving you the wink wink smile. Yep, great, bye. That sort of thing, that feeling. It's like, yeah, I hear you. No. And so you have to like, my best advice is stay present and stick with it, and go meander. You ultimately know where you're going, and they
you hit on it. Inside family systems, of course, you've got birth order issues, you've got blended family issues, you've got wounding from our childhood. What parent didn't hurt their kid at some point in time? You've got a myriad of things. You've got your own losses, traumas, life stressors, and now you have parents that need more of you than maybe you feel like you can give some time. And so, man, what you shared is just, I will use it, and I hope our listeners hear your wisdom. I appreciate this a ton. I would love to have another conversation. If you're up for another one of these, let's schedule another time to come back and share another angle or another perspective, and dig a little deeper. I think we could learn so much, and with families, we have to look to find the best, get the best input so that we can be best equipped. Because I'm telling you, this journey is pretty rocky. Through it with your family and your parents. And so if you're a professional, listen to this. Danny, how do people get a hold of you? Do you want people to get a hold of you? Don't call you an expert.
You can look me up at pathways.io or dannygutknecht.com. Either one of those will get to me. It's my email's easy, danny@pathways.io.
Awesome. I hope this is the first of many conversations. I think this is the perfect intersection for my world to learn from our friends in maybe non-traditional spaces, and be able to apply it and help like this massive number of people that really need our help, and to get them through this season alive. So I can't thank you enough. I really mean that. Thank you for taking the time and sharing with us today.
Thanks for having me. It was a great conversation, Scott.
Yeah, I really feel that way as well. I will catch you later. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in. Come back again next time. We have lots of guests from lots of places that are here to help illuminate the way and help you and your family avoid haboob. Thanks again for joining us. Take care. Have a good day.